Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Don't ruin yourself, son. For the 10th time in the last hour, Camille asked. She tried hard to be convincing. The guy's only 32 years old. He's got a lot to live for. Instead, what? Sit by his wife's bed to change her diapers. Noah kept silent, and his mother took his silence as a sign of agreement. She noted with horror all the changes in her son's appearance. There were 2 long horizontal wrinkles on his forehead and silver threads in his hair. And Noah had a bad habit of pulling his bangs, biting his lips, tapping his fingers on the table. Neurosis, clear signs. And all this he no doubt owed to his reclining wife. Who can argue that Adriana is a good wife? Camille went on, hoping that with a little more time, she would be able to get the stubborn man to agree with her arguments. Well, she was a good wife before, you know. Well, you cannot live forever with memories, was and resurfaced. And you look at her now, she is like a plant. The doctors say there's hope, said Noah, clearly immersed in his thoughts. Maybe we need more time. Camille shook her head. There he goes again. The doctors said they don't know what they're talking about. They don't want to add another patient to the institution. That's all. So they lie about hope, about the need for a home environment, for warmth from loved ones. What warmth does she need? She may not even be thinking straight. That's what they tell everyone, son, she said pleadingly. Can you see it yourself, the hope? What hope can there be when Adriana has been in bed for 4 months? She can't move a finger. I'm even scared when she looks at me, when I approach her and she looks at me, and I get goosebumps all over my body. I'm really scared of her. Noah, I'm scared. Nonsense? He waved it off. That's nonsense to you, but I'm afraid of her, no. She's lying there, not moving, not talking. Who knows what she's thinking? I don't think she's thinking anything at all. If she gets up again, it could be even worse. Maybe these times will seem like heaven to you then. Do you realize what a physically healthy but insane person is? Have you thought about it? She'll come to her senses, and she'll come at you with a knife, and you'll be dead before you know it. Who will she stab? Noah replied irritably, Mom, you talk, but don't talk too much. What makes you think she's insane? What are you, a doctor? He realized that his mother was just trying to persuade him, and that's why she didn't know what she was saying. But there are boarding schools for people like her. They have professional care, much better than yours. And doctors are there to help you if you need anything. Do you know how much a boarding school costs? Noah asked. With care and everything. It's like 2/3 of your pension every month, or half of my salary. And me. Camille clapped her hands. I've got it all worked out. We'll rent out your apartment and you'll move in here. That's the money to pay for it. You'll visit her every weekend, and of course, when and if her condition improves, and if she turns out to be mentally fine, we'll take her back right away. I'll go, Mom, he said, standing up. Adriana, it's time for your medicine. Good night. Out of the corner of his eye, Noah saw his mother's expression change from concerned to contemptuous indifference. How quickly, in a second, and the mood was already different. Go, she threw an icy tone. So you will be from under a sick woman all your life to carry pots until you grow old. You'll remember me then. Noah shrugged his shoulders and said nothing. As he was in his slippers, he quickly crossed the stairwell and opened the door of the apartment opposite his mother's. Everything was unchanged in his wife's room, although it could have changed there. The nightlight was on, he had lit it himself, and the night table was full of medicines, and none of them helped. And here was the movie he turned on for her, but it was already over. Now the screen was showing some characters in aprons and saying something, probably at speed. Adriana seemed to be asleep, but as soon as he approached the bed, she opened her eyes. "It's time for the medicine, Adriana," he said, diluting the suspension with water. "Here." No brought the teaspoon to his wife's lips and slowly poured the contents into her mouth. Good girl, she drank it. "What have we got here? Let me see. Shouldn't we be getting changed?" He put his hand under the blanket, felt the diaper. "I think it's dry." "Well, good night then. I'll turn out the light, do you mind?" Adriana, as usual, didn't mind. He adjusted the pillows, made his wife comfortable, opened the window and closed the curtains for the night, and left the night light on. "Go to sleep, Adriana. Sleep well." The corners of his wife's lips trembled. Noah realized she was trying to smile at him, but it looked creepy. Her lips were disobeying, curving, turning her face into a horrible grimace. "Go back to sleep," he repeated, and quickly went out. There are times her son, such a handsome, intelligent, successful programmer, sat at home in front of his wife. A telecommuting job solved his money problems, but it also cut Noah off from the outside world. Remote. What kind of a lame word is that? Camille couldn't accept her son's new format. All normal people go to work, and only the lame work from home, or seamstresses, homemakers. You used to get up in the morning, wash, shave, and go to work in a beautiful office. She said bitterly. At work, too, there is a collective there. Talking, news is discussed. I socialized with people, got acquainted, saw beautiful girls, tried to be no worse than others. And what has become of you now? What have you become? When was the last time you went to the barber shop? Look at the way you've grown. Soon your bangs will be in your eyes. I'll buy a headband. My son tried to make a joke. It's fashionable now. But Camille didn't appreciate the humor and wasn't going to back down. And where have you been lately, except for stores, pharmacies, and the tax collector's office? I'm telling you again, look what you've become. You're all crumpled, unkempt, wrinkled, walking around in a pajama shirt, as if that's the way it should be. Noah repeatedly ignored his mother's lamentations, shrugged his shoulders, and kept silent, silent, silent. It was getting harder and harder, though. The time when he tried to explain anything to his mother was long over. Camille refused to understand that Adriana needed constant care, and it wasn't caprice, whim, or pretense that her son really didn't care about hairdressing, that he's not interested in cultural events, and the pajama shirt turned out to be a surprisingly comfortable thing, especially when looking after a bedridden patient, that he has to change diapers and feed his wife mashed potatoes in a tuxedo. "Mom, I live my life the way I'm comfortable," he said, "with this remote job, with this outgrown hair, and this pajama shirt that suits me just fine. I'm comfortable with everything, so don't start. You look 20 years older. So what?" At this point, Mom usually let out a long sobbing sigh and covered her face with her hands. Noah silently looked at her smooth, well-groomed hands, her fingers with a fashionable manicure, a ring with a transparent stone on the ring finger. "I wonder if it's a diamond or just glass?" He wondered to himself. "Are you even listening to me?" Tragically exclaimed his mother. I am. I gotta go, Mom." Sometimes Noah regretted that he had bought an apartment in the same building as his mother. He couldn't talk himself out of it by being busy and visiting less often. She'd come herself, and that would be a real shame. Back in the good old days, before Adriana was on her feet on the bus, Camille liked to cluck her tongue at the sight of an unwashed cup in the sink, or find a speck of dust and shake her head disapprovingly. She had spent her whole life striving for perfect cleanliness and had managed to annoy her family quite a bit. Any party, watching a movie, Camille invariably preferred cleaning. A woman should be a great hostess, she repeated. Otherwise, what's the point of her? And what happened when she found out that Adriana occasionally ordered takeout? Oh, what a rage! It's full of chemicals, son, she cried. Your wife wants to poison you. Then Noah laughed. Mom, people all over the world use delivery, and there's nothing wrong with it. Restaurants themselves have no interest in their customers getting food poisoning. After all, it's a stigma on their business reputation. On the contrary, they try to make sure that everything is delicious so that people become regular customers. Is it hard for your wife to cook? Camille asked sternly. What kind of wife is she then? When we lived with your father, I worked and raised you, and every day I have cleanliness, cooked, baked goods are always on the table, and for lunch always first, second, everything as it should be. Yes, if you want to know, no, if a woman has guests and she has nothing to serve for tea, she's not a hostess at all. Camille stared at the girl's brown face with wonder and could not make out her features beneath the freckles. But the girl suddenly smiled, showing large white teeth, and held out her hand. Betty, she said, I'm from 6th B. That's how their friendship began. And then, years later, Betty, by some miracle, managed to get rid of her freckles and shorten her unruly hair. And then it became apparent to everyone around her how beautiful she really was. It turned out that Betty has a thin, straight nose, arched eyebrows, and dimples on her cheeks. The newfound beauty had a lot of admirers, which made Camille secretly jealous. But Betty was always such a funny and kind girl that it was impossible to make friends with her. And now retired, Betty's zest for life was still intact. After raising her children, she was passionate about all the things she had never had time to do before. She raised roses, studied interior design, and learned French. And in the summer, she would move to her precious rose bushes and bring her grandchildren with her. Let the children breathe the air and the parents rest, she said, and all 5 grandchildren were looking forward to summer vacations, because at Grandma's dacha, they could build tree houses as much as they wanted, splash in the pool, and run barefoot. Camille, looking at her friend, often thought that they were very different, and it is unclear what brought them together. It was not the wall newspaper. They had nothing in common, not even the tiniest common feature. Betty had a chemistry and biology degree and a passion for work. Camille had a teacher training college and worked for her pension. Betty coped with household chores all her life jokingly and could, if she was very tired, go to bed without washing the dishes or wiping the dust, and instead go for a walk with her children, and then with her grandchildren, or even just lie around reading a book. Camille has always had a cult of cleanliness and order. She wouldn't sit down to watch TV until everything was sparkling. Betty was also easy on men. After her divorce from the father of her boys, she had had plenty of affairs, but she wouldn't bring a strange man into her children's home. I have enough of my own family. She laughed in response to her friend's indignation. There are children. That's what's important. They are my family. To burden herself with a man, no. I want to decide for myself where I live, how, when to rest, when to eat, sit down, and what to spend money on. Yes, they had nothing in common, but now Camille was going to Betty, even though she didn't know why. Whether to ask for advice, or that's the way it used to be, Mom. Her son persuaded her. And now the time is quite different. And then what difference does it make? A mistress is not a mistress. What's this? Some kind of competition? Would you refuse if you were offered to unload the household, that the vacuum cleaner itself rolled on the floor and dusted, that the dishes machine washed, and delivery brought delicious food directly home? And she would refuse, crying, "Mother, because I'm not some lazy. I even always clean the floors myself with my hands. A mop is still not properly cleaned." Her grandmother called her not a mop, but a lazy girl. And I also took good care of myself. I had time, with a dress and a hairdo. And your Adriana, God knows what she wears, puts her hair in a bun and goes to work. Adriana is a rock climbing instructor. My son reminded me. At her job, she's comfortable in gym clothes. How's she gonna wear a dress on the climbing wall? Think about it. And who needs a hairdo? Not the kind of wife I wanted for you. Mother sighed, and again, those sorrowfully pressed lips and universal sadness in her eyes. I wanted you to have a normal economic wife to take care of you as you need. And you, who did you choose for yourself? And the children will go. Then what? They'll always be dirty and hungry. And all this was back then, and now Noah tried to reduce his mother's visits to a minimum. When she sees how many dirty dishes he's got now, I dread to think what she'd do. Or even worse, will begin to wail that "Here's Sonny, to what you wife lying brought you?" I don't even have time to wash the dishes. So, no matter how it was, but to make daily visits of politeness to the mother had to avoid the worst. Meanwhile, Adriana's condition did not change. Sometimes it even seemed that there was nothing more to wait for. Noah habitually cared for his wife, but more and more often he began to feel anger instead of compassion. Maybe it was just spring. He asked himself. The sun was beginning to warm up outside, the first flowers were blooming, and the drops were ringing merrily. And even in the best weather he had to run to the store or to the pharmacy. And it was impossible to be delayed even for a minute. And the days grew longer and longer. And the streets were filled with couples in love. In the favorite cafes again opened summer verandas, and musicians began to hold concerts in the open air. And movie nights, when the audience sat right on the grass, wrapped themselves in plaids, and watched new movies, just like that, on the street. All of that had to be cut out of his life, and maybe even forever. The thought of it made Noah ache. Why was he being punished like this? He had never robbed, killed, raped, sold people into slavery, or engaged in espionage. But for some reason he was sentenced to indefinite imprisonment in 4 walls, next to his wife. Who? Is she even a wife? Or is it just an empty shell of her, without thoughts, without feelings? Maybe she doesn't even recognize him. Does she remember me? He asked the doctors. They'd throw up their hands. It's hard to tell as long as she's not talking. Try communicating with her, like open eyes means yes and closed eyes means no. Can you hear me, Adriana? She was opening her eyes. Do you remember who I am? Affirmative again. Do you remember what happened to you? She remembered. Can you squeeze my hand? Her eyes closed immediately. Tears gathered in the corners. Don't cry, my good girl. Noah stroked her short-cropped, long hair was too hard to wash head. Adriana kept her eyes closed, a single tear rolling out from under her closed eyelids. Camille had only had one friend in her entire life. They'd become friends in high school when they'd been assigned to draw a wall newspaper as punishment for a poorly written biology Olympiad. Betty had been a thin, small girl then, with a face strewn with frequent freckles. Her stiff, dark red hair tangled like wire, even when pulled back into a tight braid. What's going on at Noah's? Betty asked, putting a huge dish of hot cakes on the table. So right with jam, left with carrots, meat looking right at you. So, how are your young ones? Any better? No way, Camille sighed sorrowfully. Listen, she asked with horror, looking at the mountain of pies. Where do you get all these pies, Betty? And how do you eat so much and not get fat? My friend shrugged. Why do I have to eat everything? I treat everyone, neighbors, acquaintances, guests, even go to the market sellers. Acquaintances also treat always. They are all day at the counter tired. I just don't know how to cook little by little, so I give away the extra. You're lucky, aren't you? I have nothing but grief, Betty. Is Adriana worse? Betty frowned. Hey, why don't I ask my sister-in-law? She's at this new clinic, working with this doctor. Anyway, he says he's on the verge of genius. Have her take a look at Adriana. Maybe she can give you some advice. No one's ever seen her before. Camille dismissed her. Everyone just kept saying one thing. Let's be optimistic. We must hope. Don't despair. Repeating and repeating. That's good, isn't it? Betty said, nibbling on a strawberry shortcake with gusto. It means she'll get better, little by little. Camille shook her head. I don't believe it, she said quietly. When they brought her in, she's just lying there like a steak. No tiptoes around her, and he's already. His hair's even thinning, Betty. Can you believe it? He's in his 30s, and he's already balding and graying. What's wrong with that? Well, it's a common problem with men today. My friend smiled. They're balding early now. Yours is still early. Some are as bald as a knee at 25. Camille, not listening, continued. And I don't understand what he eats when everything. His whole life is subordinated to Adriana. He has to wash her, feed her, give her medicine. The nurse comes to give her shots and drips. How much money does it cost? I'm not even going to tell you. My son lives according to her regimen, and she's not even alive. A living thing can't exist on the regimen of a non-living thing. She's taking the soul out of my boy. If I understand you correctly, said Betty, are you saying that Noah needs to rest? But that's a perfectly normal thing to do. Hire a nurse, and he can go somewhere, get away for a while. And you're around to see that Adriana is looked after properly. It's no big deal. I don't see any problem. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He sits with that woman all the time, as if someone had chained him up. He's like an automaton, washing, feeding, changing, dressing, and everything in a circle. His wife is not a stranger's aunt, and the doctors say so. So what if she's a wife? Camille almost screamed. That love is enough for 6 months. And then what? Give, bring, earn. I don't know. They're in love, you see. I was against this wedding right away. You saw her if she was lazy, cooking every other day. And me. Betty smiled. It's a modern fashion. I even like it. It's you and me, as on stilts, on heels clomped, and in winter and summer, and their blouses with ruffles ironed, these skirts, and they have freedom. You can wear sneakers and a hoodie all year long. Walk as you please, no one will say a word. And about cooking, they don't bother, and thank God. And you remember how we received guests and salad, and hot food and appetizers. And then there's the cake, and the guests would leave, and you'd be washing dishes till night. Oh, how I remember. And they will order pizza and sit, chatting. The table is set, and do not evaluate, do not lay on the food. They're there to talk, not to eat. I think that's great. I'd rather they take a walk than cook for 3 days. Oh, Betty, how indifferent you are as a mother to your children. Do you like the fact that your wife doesn't look after your son properly? I'd never thought about it. My friend snorted and reached for the next pie. Both my sons are independent. Why should anyone take care of them? They'll look after whoever you want to look after them. So much so that you won't wake up until after the third child is born." Betty laughed, very pleased with her joke. Camille was silent. She had been wrong to start this conversation. Betty would never understand. She was all about modern trends. Freedom from kitchen slavery, hard labor, cleaning, and all that. They want freedom, you see. And who will keep the family hearth? It's not without reason that a woman is called a keeper. What can you keep when you entrust your hearth to others? Cleaners, cooks, all these household machines, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners. Freedom, you say? Camille herself didn't share all these newfangled fads. Traditions aren't invented by fools either, right? If one generation lives one way, another one another, and the third one the other way around, what's the result? Disorder, and no experience will have time to accumulate. Each new generation will reinvent the bicycle, although it was invented long ago. Still, she said, a woman should create coziness, and this is cooking and cleaning and curtains to be able to sew and bake pies. You work part-time in a kindergarten. Her friend reminded her. Afternoon at home, why not cash a Vera vat and sew curtains if the free time is a carload, and others work full-time and even irregular. And those who work for themselves, they don't leave work at all. They even think about business at home. My husband made good money. Why would I be tired? By the way, is also very well paid. But Adriana, no matter how much I told her, she wouldn't give up her job. You see, it was important to her to work. I wonder why. I don't know. Maybe she's been wiggling her ass in front of other men. There's such a thing as a favorite job, Camille. If it's never happened in your life, you're just unlucky. That's enough. Camille got really angry. You always disagree with me. Tell me, how can I save my son from Adriana? He'll just sit by her side. She could live another 30 years. Can you imagine if he's not free of her until he's 60? No friends, no career, no kids. Does he want to be rescued? Betty asked. Or is this another one of your diversions to make the guy happy? Betty, are you out of your mind? What kind of diversion? What kind of diversion? He doesn't know what he wants yet. And I'm a mother. I know what's good for my son. I think Adriana should be institutionalized and have doctors watch her. And Noah can start his life over again. Go back to work, a normal job, not this remote job, no idea what it is. He'll see people, learn to talk again, revitalize, and then we'll find him a nice girl. He'll marry again, but how can we convince him? I don't know. My friend grinned. There was not a single note of sympathy in her voice, and even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. Why not? Because you're sticking your nose in where you're not even there. Well, you know. Camille jumped up, panting with indignation. I thought you were my friend, my only friend. And you? Fuck you. She ran out of Betty's house at a speed she'd never been able to develop in her youth. Is that what resentment means? Noah decided to take a little unplanned vacation. No big deal. Just a half hour on a bench in his own backyard. Adriana had fallen asleep after lunch, and he already knew she wouldn't wake up until an hour later. He was about to sit down to work, but the sun outside the window was already very warm. And it turned out that there was no coffee in the house. A programmer can't go without coffee, even without food and water, but not without coffee, no way. Noah once again looked into his wife's room. She was sleeping soundly, and it was warm outside. The children were running around the yard, scaring the pigeons. Noah, leaving the store, leisurely deep, breathing in the warm spring air, reached his house. How long had it been since he had been in a hurry to get anywhere? He felt as if he had spent many, many years in a dungeon. And suddenly he was allowed to go out into the fresh air and be among normal people who every day walk, go about their business, and often do not even notice how beautiful the world around them. And Noah noticed everything, the puddles on the asphalt, which reflected the blue sky, so high today, and the wonderful aroma of buds bursting on the branches, frightened pigeons, especially one with a pearlescent breast and a black feather in its tail. Noah tore off the edge of a loaf and crumbled it to the birds. They immediately engaged in a fierce struggle, each for his own crumb of bread. "Have you fed them yet?" He heard a woman's voice. "Stand down, guys, I'll feed you tomorrow." "Excuse me?" The girl standing right in front of him had shoulder-length curly hair and a cute, snub nose. She showed him a bread roll. "I feed them here every day," she smiled. "And today you've replaced me." Noah smiled, not knowing what to say. The girl was short, just about shoulder height, and she was wearing a short plaid coat that she had unbuttoned. Perhaps she was hot from the spring heat, or maybe she was just being fashionable. The ends of her light mottled scarf dangled somewhere around her knees. Her plump lips were slightly tinted with a pinkish gloss. Her skin was already touched with the first tan of spring. Noah suddenly thought, how long had it been since he'd seen such a normal, healthy girl? Not in a cast, not in bandages, without the monstrous pallor and haggard look, and he'd forgotten how nice it felt. "And I just moved into this house," she said. 2 weeks ago, I live on the 5th. So then, we are neighbors." He was happy. "And I'm on the 4th. Only I've never seen you before. My name is No." "Molly," the girl introduced herself. "We'll visit each other now, because, you know, when you move to a new place, always so lack of communication. I used to live in another city, and I knew everyone in the neighborhood. Everyone used to come to my house for tea, and so did I. I haven't settled in here yet. It's a bit boring." Yeah, he was confused. It was time to go home. Adriana must be awake by now. "Yeah, I know what you mean." "No." Camille, carrying a bag from the nearest supermarket, came rushing across the yard, her smile bright. "I bought you some of your favorite tangerines." "Don't hurry. Give me the keys. I'll bring them to you myself. It's a tricky situation." Molly couldn't have known about Adriana, of course. How could she? But if he rushed home now, his mother might well stop, talk to the neighbor, and blab everything. But he didn't want to give his mother the keys either. "Here." He made up his mind and took the keys out of his pocket. His mother, smiling contentedly, entered the entryway. "That's good. Let the boy talk a little more with the pretty neighbor." Noah and Adriana's apartment smelled of medicine, and there was a peculiarly unpleasant silence, the kind of silence that only happens in homes where there is a seriously ill person. And of course, there was no coziness at all. The windows were unwashed, the curtains had not been washed for 6 months, and how many dishes were dirty? It's just awful. Poor No. He's so exhausted with Adriana. He can't think of home. Camille put the bag on the table, put out the tangerines, and put the kettle on. When Noah comes, at least he'll have a hot cup of coffee. She looked into Adriana's room. Of course, everything was furnished to the highest standards: an orthopedic bed, a drip stand, a nurse coming in every day, a bedside table with medicines. On the wall hung a large TV on the back of the bed towel, in the dresser stock of diapers, disposable diapers, and wet wipes. And the sleeping Tsarevna herself was washed and in a clean nightie. It was like a deluxe room for VIP patients. Yes, no, the poor man spares no effort, everything for his wife. Where can he think of himself? And his wife is a vegetable. And she's neither better nor worse. Camille suddenly felt such a rush of hatred for this mutilated woman that she was afraid of herself. She caught herself looking at the pillow and thinking that it would be as easy as putting it on Adriana's face and then leaving the apartment as if nothing had happened. I wonder how long it will be before she suffocates. Adriana, awakened by her mother-in-law's gaze, opened her eyes. They were colorless, not alive, like a doll's. What is she looking at? Are you still breathing, Deck? Camille hissed, leaning in close to the woman's face. You're still breathing, I see, lying there spitting at the ceiling, while Noah works for you every day like a damned man. Who was it that sentenced him to you? Adriana could answer nothing, but it seemed to her mother-in-law that something flashed in her eyes. Astonishment, fear, resentment. Listen to me. Straightened up, Camille. I do not wish you harm, as well as good in general. I do not care about you at all. You're a stranger to me, and you'll always be a stranger. But if you want to know, I even sympathize a little with what happened to you. Maybe it's worse than a quick death, but I'm a mother. It's not for you, it's for my son. I can't bear to see him forget himself, his life, for your sake. Have you seen what he's become? You're clapping your eyes so you see. Doesn't your conscience gnaw at you for eating someone else's life? Why would a young, healthy man want a plant wife? Don't you feel sorry for him? He's burying himself alive. Adriana closed her eyes, signaling that she didn't want to listen to her mother-in-law's speeches anymore. But she leaned toward her again, hooked her fingers into her daughter-in-law's short hair, and lifted her head. Adriana, she whispered, if you can't get well, then die already. Die. Take pity on the boy. He'll feel better. Release Noah. Let him breathe. Let him live. She hoped the woman would open her eyes again, look at her, but she didn't. Camille released her daughter-in-law's hair and wiped her hands squeamishly on her dress. What is there to say to you, you wretch? She left the room. When Noah returned home, his mother was already sitting in the kitchen drinking tea. He noticed that all the dishes had been washed, the crumbs had been swept from the table, and even the dead geraniums on the window had finally been watered. What a sight! He exclaimed with amused surprise. What is it that you decided to clean up? Maybe you also cooked dinner? His mood was high. His little guerrilla foray into the outside world was a success. Walked without hurrying anywhere, and this is almost a whole adventure. But the gifts of fate did not end there. Today she was generous to him, and in the sun he managed to warm up and feed the pigeons, and also with a girl so cool to communicate. I'd love to visit her, especially since she almost invited him. Sit down, son, have some coffee, Camille said. Adriana is still asleep. I just checked. Dry, clean, no fever. That's how it is. Noah looked at his watch. She's taking a long time today. I'll go and see her. Sit down, don't make a fuss. His mother caught him by the arm. I told you clearly, she's asleep. I just left her, so don't disturb her. Let her get her strength back. Why don't you tell me how you like our new neighbor? Well, he couldn't help smiling. She's cute, nice, very sociable. Nice, huh? Camille smiled back. It's good that you like her. Now imagine how many of them there are around, and everyone would be happy to chat, to go on a date with such an interesting man. And you're still at home, guarding your Adriana? Enough, Mom. Noah slammed his open palm on the table. That's enough. And thank you for the tangerines and for cleaning up too, but I don't have time. Adriana needs to be fed soon, and we'll probably have guests tonight. So I'm sorry. I'm busy. Come on, son. Don't be nervous. Mother got up from the table. I'm just leaving. What kind of guests are you having? Do I know them? No reason, replied the son, already softened. One guest is expected, and that's all. Adriana is a friend. Kathy is her name. She's a hairdresser. She used to do Adriana's hair and makeup. She called today, said she's gonna be in our neighborhood tonight to check on us. So I don't have much time. I have to. I'm going. Camille calmed him down and went out into the corridor. The keys are on the table. Bye. As soon as she was home, Camille grabbed a stool and placed it by the front door. Her plan of action was simple and therefore ingenious. Back there, in Noah's kitchen, Camille had realized what she should do. Now all she had to do was wait a little longer. As soon as she heard footsteps on the stairs, she would look through the peephole. Not to miss Kathy. It was a long wait, at least an hour. Camille tried to stretch without moving away from the door, so as not to miss her friend Adriana. There was always the option of intercepting her on the way back when she was leaving the apartment, but then she would probably be in a hurry. And Noah, a well-mannered boy, would be sure to see her off if the hour was late. There are too many complications. It would make much more sense to catch Kathy up now, on the way to visit. It wasn't until 6:00 p.m., when an unfamiliar lush-haired brunette appeared on the floor, that Camille realized it was time. She, trying not to make any noise, opened her door and called out softly, "Kathy?" The stranger turned around. "Good evening. Do we know each other?" "Not yet." Camille smiled. "You see, I'm Noah's mom. Could you come in for a moment? I just need to discuss something." "With me?" "Yes, Kathy, with you." Come in, please. It won't take long at all." Okay. Kathy entered the apartment, but did not undress. She stopped in the hallway. "What's wrong? Did something happen to Adriana?" "Did she?" "No, Kathy." Camille smiled. "Adriana is still the same, and that's the main problem. Come into the kitchen, and I'll make you some tea. Or do you want coffee?" "Never mind. Why did you call me here?" "What's going on?" Camille looked at her guest hesitantly, as if making up her mind. "Well, if you insist that you're having a serious conversation with me, let's get to the point." "All right, Kathy, whatever you say." "You see, Kathy, right to the point, Camille. Unfortunately, our dear Adriana, it's not getting any better. The doctors say to be patient and wait, but no one can tell us how long and what exactly to wait for. Although Noah is doing everything possible, but..." She waved her hands and looked sadly at the guest. Kathy looked at her hostess expectantly and did not say a word. My heart bleeds for both of them. Camille continued, "I am a mother, and it pains me so much to see Noah suffering in vain, and Adriana's helplessness too. It is such agony. You probably can't even imagine it. It's a good thing, though, and God forbid. You may not believe me, but I made a vow to myself a long time ago that whoever my son chooses to marry will be my daughter. Whether I like her or not, I will take her as my own child. I know very well how an unhealthy mother-in-law can eat up the life of a young couple. I promised myself I'd never be like that. And our precious Adriana, I love her like my own daughter." "Of course you do." Kathy nodded understandingly. "That's the way it should be in good families. But I still don't understand." Yes. Camille put her hand over Kathy's palm. "I'll try to make it clear to you. I've been talking to the doctors about getting our Adriana back on her feet. Secretly from Noah, of course. He doesn't know anything. I don't want to alarm him. He's already exhausted from nerves. Nothing's working. So far we have tried massages and physiotherapy, and even acupuncture too, but the results are so negligible that there is nothing to talk about. You could say there are none at all. So, one doctor told me in confidence, of course, what might help. Well, shock therapy, some kind of very strong shock that will make Adriana rise to the occasion. And that's where I wanted to ask for your help. Is that okay with you? You just need to, No, wait. Kathy stopped her. Are you sure you're not gonna make her worse? She's already weak, sick, and you're suggesting we give her a big shock. What if she dies? What do you mean? Camille assured her. On the contrary, this shock will help to open up the hidden resources of the body, and then our Adriana will recover. Recover from the shock? Of course. You see, the doctor told me that if some function of the organism is not used, it dies out, and it is very, very difficult to reconnect it, to make it work again. And worst of all, it can be too late. The function will die off forever, and our Adriana has, Kathy. Wait, what function are you talking about? She can open and close her eyes, she can swallow and digest food. That's all true, but you and I, Kathy, don't know if she'll ever be able to move and speak. And that's important. Do you agree with me? Camille tried to speak confidently with enthusiasm. I should be stinking of that same enthusiastic confidence like an alcoholic stinks of booze. She reminded herself. Don't you, Kathy, want our Adriana to be herself again, not a helpless plant like she is now? Help Kathy. Noah won't hear of any such thing. And this may be our only chance. Can it not be taken? Kathy, still looking at her mistress suspiciously and anxiously, sighed. What did you come up with? Tell me. I bought it. Camille rejoiced inwardly. I should still have entered the theater. I'm an even better actress than the others. So that the shock therapy would work, she began. The patient must be affected. That is, something meaningful to him must be at risk. And the only person who really matters to Adriana right now is her husband. And that's only natural. They have no children, and she doesn't see anyone but Noah. He takes care of her, somehow tries to communicate with her in his own way. He's the center of her universe. What about her favorite activities, things to do? What do you do when she's lying there not moving? So you and I, we need to act through him, through Noah. I mean, if Adriana realizes that she's losing her husband, maybe she'll get angry, scared. Better, of course, both. It will give her a powerful burst of strength, and then she will be able to overcome her weakness with words. Try to seduce Noah somehow, to arouse his interest, maybe even have an affair with him. The main thing is for Adriana to realize that she either step up right now, or that's it. She has no more family. Kathy sat with her eyes down, and nothing could be read on her face. Camille looked at her guest with genuine hope. She had to be persuaded. If only she would believe, if only she would not refuse. Camille did not believe in shock therapy, but she had to get Noah off Adriana's bed. Yes, she might die of shock. So what? She's almost dead anyway, just breathing and flapping her eyes. Maybe she doesn't want to live anymore. Somebody asked her that, and she can't say anything. So why not ease her transition to a better world? Maybe the theory about rebirths isn't wrong, and Adriana will be born again in a healthy body, and she's being held here by force. All the more that both Noah and his mother will be clean before the law. They've never laid a finger on Adriana. Noah cared for her devotedly. If they needed to, they'd go out of their way to find a great caregiver or not. Better to send her to some kind of institution, so it's not murder at all. And if Adriana survives, then Noah will be the beneficiary. Camille could see the good mood he was in when he came home today, and his eyes glistened when he looked at his neighbor. What would happen if he met a young, beautiful woman who wanted to seduce him? After that, he himself would not want to go back to Adriana's bed, to a world of IVs, diapers, and who knows what else. And Adriana, well, they will put her somewhere under supervision, will find ways, will even pay the staff to look after her better. If only the brunette would agree, but she was silent, sitting still, her eyes fixed on her hands. "Help, Kathy," Camille begged. "We all, and most of all Adriana, really need your help. Don't say no to us. No, today everything came easily." He quickly put the apartment in order, fed, and even dressed up his wife for a meeting with a friend, and once again ran to the store to buy some cakes for tea. And even quite unexpectedly, he noticed that he was humming some cheerful song. Today's short furlough into life, had something changed in him? Noah suddenly realized that he was alive. Until then, it had seemed to him that everything that made him human had to be ruthlessly destroyed. Otherwise, strangely enough, there was no surviving. What is the point of dreaming of a walk on a warm spring day, of a conversation with a beautiful girl, if you can't have it anyway, like a child can't have sweets? So why torture yourself with meaningless and unrealizable desires, only to torture yourself, to wear yourself out, to deprive the last nerves, and eventually one day put his head in the noose, just because it became completely unbearable? No, it's better to get rid of all the stupid desires, not to remember them, to forget that there are similar days, entertainment, unexpected acquaintances. Become a robot to survive. Paradoxically, it was the only way. And now just 1 hour out in the wild, and everything human about Noah came alive. He rejoiced in the sunshine, laughed at the pigeons fiddling, admired his new neighbor, and flirted with her a little. He was alive and enjoyed it because he had not spent his time so richly and interestingly for a long time. As it turns out, it doesn't take much for a man to come alive. Kathy arrived around 7:00 p.m. Noah opened the door to her and was even a little confused. He had expected to see an old acquaintance whom he had never really looked at. There was a recognizable silhouette, named Kathy, but nothing more. He hadn't even recognized her on the phone, and seeing her now, he was startled. Why hadn't he noticed that Kathy was such a beautiful woman? Her thick, dark hair fell in glossy waves over her shoulders. Her eyes, skillfully emphasized by makeup, looked like foxes. Her narrow, sharp chin and long neck. The smile that played on Kathy's lips was both joyful and a little defiant. Or so it seemed, because of her slight fox squint. Didn't recognize it. Asked the guest, "I thought we knew each other for a long time." Sparks of laughter flashed in her eyes. "I did." Noah said, "But not right away. I don't recognize myself in the mirror very often." She laughed, loudly, merrily. How nice it is, it turns out, when someone laughs. Noah hadn't heard anyone laugh for so long that he couldn't stand it and laughed with his guest. "It's good to see you, Kathy." Heartily, he said, and gave his wife's friend a fleeting hug. "Adriana and I have been waiting." "How is she?" Kathy asked. "Is there any improvement?" "It's hard to say." Noah answered evasively. "Come and see for yourself." Kathy tiptoed down the corridor and peered into the room. "Hello, Adriana." Kathy smiled and touched her friend's hair. "Look how your hair has already grown back. That's speed. Soon you'll be a mermaid again." Adriana's lips curved again, trying unsuccessfully to form a smile. "What is it, Adriana?" Kathy didn't understand her. "Are you in pain?" "No." Noah answered for his wife. "She wants to smile at you. You better talk to her. If she closes her eyes, it means she wants to say no. If she opens her eyes, yes, you two talk while I set the table." Kathy sat down on the edge of her friend's bed and took Adriana's lifeless hand in her palm. "Are you getting better?" she asked. "How are you feeling? For better, even a little?" Adriana closed her eyes. "So," said Kathy, "we need a little more time. You must be terribly tired of lying down, aren't you? You are always so mobile." Adriana's eyes opened. Kathy stroked her friend's fingers. No reaction, as if they weren't alive. "You'll definitely start getting up soon." Kathy said firmly, "You just have to set yourself up for it, you know? Tell yourself, I can get up. I can do it. If not today, then tomorrow I can get up. So lie there and repeat it to yourself, day after day, like a mantra. You've got so much to do. And know he misses you. He wants you to get better. Don't forget that. Make sure you get well, and remember that it's half up to you." Adriana tried to smile again. "Can you try moving your fingers?" Kathy asked her. "Let's try. 1, 2, 3. Eyes closed. Are you tired? Do you want to sleep? Eyes open. Good, then go to sleep. I'll sit in the kitchen and talk to Noah." Noah was already pouring tea into cups. On the table there was a dish with cakes and a vase of Mom's tangerines. Even a small bunch of fresh flowers in a cup, for the sake of living and beauty. "It's just a holiday. Do you like the flowers?" asked Noah. "Honestly, I did not buy them and just stripped the flower bed, but I really wanted to decorate the table. They're lovely," admired Kathy. "I see you're spoiling yourself." "No," he smiled. "It's for the occasion of your arrival. How's Adriana looking?" "Oh," Kathy shook her head. "Don't ask. I wish I could say she looks better than last time, but so far, what do you think?" "I don't know." Noah answered honestly. Suddenly it was clear to him how tired he was, not just for today, but for all these days, weeks of fears, hopes, tense waiting, yes, waiting. For what? He didn't even know it himself. "I'm just waiting," he said. "I don't know what I'm waiting for. Sometimes I think she's better, sometimes the opposite. And most of the time, nothing changes. It's like when you look at a drawing for a long, long time, it seems that some fragments are moving. But in reality, you've just looked through all your eyes. But it can't go on like this forever, can it?" "Yes," Kathy echoed him. "It can't. I guess it can't. Don't be discouraged, okay? Maybe you just need a little rest, and then you can get back into the fight. You can get discouraged when there's hope." He grinned. "I've given up hope a long time ago. It's the same. But if hopes are not justified, it's even worse. Then it's the end, you know? Well, drink your tea. I've made you very busy, but I didn't mean to. I just don't have anyone to talk to. You know, she's up. I completely forgot. I have to go to my place. Why don't I at least walk you out?" Noah offered. He knew Kathy just wanted to get out of that apartment. From him, from Adriana, from the whole atmosphere of sickness and hopelessness. But he wanted to be with her a little longer, next to Kathy or neighbor Molly, any girl who was free, moving, fixing her hair, laughing, talking. He looked into his wife's room and made sure Adriana was asleep. "Shall we go?" he said, helping Kathy put on his jacket. "I'll tell her that you said goodbye and that you said hello, but I'll tell her everything else too." that I wish her not to give up. Kathy reminded her. I'll tell her that too. Come on. The evening was warm, and yes, what's no? There were no words. They ran out, ceased to exist, scattered into letters. He reached out and touched her hair. It was soft, warm, beckoning him to snuggle into it and fall asleep as if hypnotized. Noah took another step and tilted his head, touched the woman's neck with his lips. The skin was so warm there, and he could feel her pulse with his lips, and the scent of perfume grew darker and brighter. She didn't push him away, and that too was a miracle. A woman, warm, alive, very near. Noah returned home only in the morning, feeling so vicious and happy, as if he were not a grown man, but yesterday's schoolboy, who at the prom had pinned in a dark corner a pretty classmate. Adriana was awake. Noah entered her room and stopped at the bedside. The traffic was blocked. He said, guiltily smiling. Had to walk and then back. No, it wasn't. He sat down on the bed and looked his wife straight in the eyes. How beautiful they used to be, huge, blue, smiling. They must have been the ones he had fallen in love with once upon a time. Blue, full of happiness, Adriana's big eyes, he drowned in them and didn't want to swim out. And now they seem to have faded and become unappealing. What does illness do to a man? I've come to tell you I'm leaving you, Adriana. I'm sorry. I know it's not your fault. I know it's not your fault at all. But I'm tired. I don't have any strength left. With you, it's like I'm becoming like you. Today, I realize that I'm still alive. Alive, you know? I want to live, Adriana, and that's why I have to leave. No didn't ask to be let go. He just told his wife everything that was on his heart, and for some reason it made him feel better. Don't worry, you won't be alone. We're looking for a well-cared-for boarding house for you, with the best doctors and nurses. You'll live there, you'll be cared for, and there will be lots of other people there. You won't be as lonely as you are here. Maybe you'll even get better faster. Because who knows, maybe I'm just making you worse with my stupid nursing. I'm not a nurse. I don't know the ins and outs, and you're just suffering. You shouldn't be at home. We'll find a good boarding house, I promise you that. With a garden, with clean and bright rooms, and the food will be delicious. No offense, Adriana. It's just that I can't take it anymore, and I'm torturing you and myself. Do you want me to hate you in the end? Adriana closed her eyes. Well, that's good, he said and stroked his wife's head. Good girl. I had no doubt you would understand. That's right. Now I'm going to go pack. You'll have a nurse at first until we find you a boarding house. Camille was celebrating her release. On such a happy occasion, she decided to forgive her friend Betty for her insensitivity, to visit and share her happy news. On her way to her friend's house, Camille bought a cake. That's it, Betty, she announced from the doorway. Take the cake and let's celebrate. No more suffering, no. Do you have any wine? I could use a drink on such an occasion. But Betty, as usual, looked at everything in her own way and asked unpleasant questions. So you brought the cake to celebrate what? Explain it to me, because I'm still not getting it. Betty, where did you get that lingo from? Camille was outraged. It's silly and ridiculous to imitate young people at our age. We're going to celebrate the fact that everything is back to normal now. Adriana is in a boarding house. Noah is living with a new woman. Is that bad? Let's be happy about that. In other words, Betty clarified, we're celebrating the fact that your son ran away, left his sick wife, and found himself a new woman. Am I understanding you correctly? Camille wrinkled her nose. Betty, come on, stop it. Are you going to lecture me? What are you, a priest? Do you think it's better if my son sits around her his whole life? Or has a stroke from overexertion and then either turns into a vegetable or dies at 35? Do you think that's better? I think, Betty clarified, better to wait for Adriana to recover. And the doctors told you with one voice that she was not hopeless, not to run to another skirt, who, by the way, is not very clever either. If your Noah ran away from Adriana, left her helpless and sick, then what if he won't run away from another one? A little fox like him rolls around all his life until he meets a fox, and you're still happy about it. You're not a mother, screamed Camille. You've had children, but you've never learned to be a mother, and you never will. You have no heart, because you have no heart. For a normal woman, a child is sacred. It must be protected. That's a must. Betty agreed. While it's still a child. Yours is all grown up now, Camille. And you haven't noticed. You've been running around, wiping his snot, and he's a grown man. For a mother, a child is always a child, a child. It's only different for people like you. You've raised him, and then you're on your own, like an animal, honestly. She fed it, taught it to hunt, and that's it, get out. But man is not an animal, Betty. Realize that at last. A man spends his whole life worrying about his children. And then, have you thought about such a simple thing as the continuation of the species? Even if Adriana gets up, there's still 1,000 questions about whether she'll be able to give birth. She's all beaten up, and a child must be conceived and carried. And if she does, will she have the strength to take care of the baby? Or do we put that on no, too? No, Betty. I look at you and I don't know what kind of friend you are to me. You're only trying to hurt my no. You've known him since you were a kid, but Adriana, that cripple, is nothing to you. And you're worried about her, not my son. Camille jumped up and ran for the exit. If I'm worried about Adriana, Betty said without getting up, it's because she's sick. She really needs help. Unlike your Noel, who is a healthy moose and a grandiose coward, and you're encouraging that cowardice in him. You don't know what motherly love is, shouted Camille back at her. Goodbye, friend. I've had enough. She slammed the door loudly in farewell. Fool. Betty sighed and took her cell phone out of her pocket. Hello, Wendy. Hello, darling. Wendy, remember you told me about that brilliant doctor you're working with now? I have a favor to ask you. Could he see a patient? Her family sent her to a boarding school, but there seems to be hope for her recovery. Please talk to him, darling. If necessary, we can even bring her in for an appointment. 1 year later, Noah has not appeared once in the past year in his former apartment. Camille finally offered to sell it, or at least rent it out, but Noah couldn't make up his mind. It seemed to him that if someone moved into the apartment, it would be like burning all the bridges, as if there was nothing, neither Adriana nor him. The apartment was empty, and Noah didn't even know if his mother was there. No, probably not. What would she do there? Only in his dreams did he still go back there, and for some reason he saw the devastation. The torn wallpaper pieces blended all the way to the floor, and for some reason the floor itself was concrete, uncovered. Noah found mountains of garbage in the kitchen, broken windows in the rooms, and when he went into Adriana's bedroom, he saw that his wife was still lying on her bed, only her hair had grown so long that it was falling over her eyes. Hello, Adriana. He spoke softly and reached out to brush the hair away from his wife's face. But as soon as he touched that long tangled hair, Adriana suddenly opened her eyes wide and sank with pleasure into his hand with teeth as sharp as a blade. Noah cried out, struggling to wrench his hand from his wife's ravenous jaws. He could hear the bones crunching on her teeth, and she rumbled with pleasure like a giant contented cat. Finally, he managed to twist away to run away, but Adriana kept looking at him and smiling her bloody, meaningless smile. After such dreams, Noah woke up sticky with cold sweat and couldn't figure out where he was for a long time. It didn't work out with Kathy. For some reason, she wasn't happy when she saw him on the doorstep with his things. "What's the matter?" she asked, dumbfounded, and then she started talking nonsense about how it had never been arranged, and it was all for shock therapy, and she was doing it for Adriana. "What kind of therapy?" he asked. "Kathy, what's going on? Yesterday everything was fine, and today you're kicking me out? You should ask your mom about therapy." "I'm stupid. I was under hypnosis. I believed her. I wanted what was best." Ask her. Let her tell you everything." No didn't ask her anything, Camille. He didn't even tell her that Kathy had kicked him out. All he could figure out was that his mother had made something up and convinced Kathy that it was for Adriana's benefit. Why? Most likely to convince him to leave his wife. The realization, it was painful. The implication was that Camille had been so diligent in doing him good that she had permanently ruined his life. Noah made no excuses for himself. He was a traitor himself, and now he would have to live with it. But his mother had really wanted this betrayal to take place. Day after day, she had literally talked him into disowning his wife, and it didn't look like she was repenting. Noah still kept calling his mother, and even lied to her about living with Kathy. But he couldn't help it. He talked with all his might and tried to wrap up the conversation as quickly as possible. He hated to hear how pleased Camille's voice became when he talked about how he and Kathy were going to the movies today, and yesterday they were thinking about where to go on vacation. Her mother had said that Adriana was now living in a specialized boarding school where she was being taken care of. Well, that's good. Noah rented a studio apartment near the center and decided he needed to pull himself together and start a new life. I guess you could say he had succeeded. He had a lot of free time again, and it was possible to spend money just on himself alone. Sometimes there were even girls, but none of them really got him. He didn't want to, except for the nightmare, after which he couldn't fall asleep. Again, it never gave up, and Noah knew that this dream would probably never come off. Adriana, according to her mother, had never recovered, and the doctors had given up all hope. He guessed she was lying, Camille. Adriana hated her and would never take an interest in her well-being, much less visit her. But every time he was about to ask his mother for the address of the boarding house where Adriana was, it was as if something stopped him. It seemed that if he knew where to look for his wife, there would be no turning back. He would have to go and take her away, voluntarily and forcibly, to plunge back into his old life, subordinated to the schedule of feedings and medications, and most importantly to the hopeless eternal longing. Noah's life passed between nightmarish dreams, with a strange reality that was sometimes indistinguishable from a dream. He felt that his entire existence had become illusory transparent, somehow fake. He lived as he hid. From whom? From what? Who knows? One day he decided to visit his wife. Camille hesitated for a long time, but in the end gave her son the address of the boarding school where Adriana had been placed. "Let me call there myself and find out." I begged her. "Why do you need such complications? Go somewhere, then come back. Adriana won't recognize anyone anyway. I want to see her. Cut Noah off. Give me the address, I'm going there anyway." You know what, son? Noah went there the next morning. The private boarding school his mother had talked about turned out to be an ordinary one, the word Anschau's fitting here like no other. Cluttered corridors, upholstered chairs and walls painted in some dreary gray-green color. There was a distinct odor of burnt porridge in the air. "You're a private establishment, aren't you?" exploded Noah. "What's going on here? Why is everything so ugly, so shabby?" The girl behind the front desk straightened up to her full height. "We have a very diverse patient population here, young man. A lot of old people on whom the luxury of the environment can affect very depressing. A simple thing like houseplants or shampoos in the bathroom, for example. Do you know that a sick person, for example, can easily drink shampoo and eat cactus? Such people are better off with fewer potentially dangerous objects around them, and potentially dangerous for such a sick person is everything." "Stop it." Noah bellowed. "Just say that your management is pocketing the sponsor's money, and they don't want to pay for the patient's upkeep out of their own pockets either." "Isn't that right? Don't talk to me, and show me my wife immediately. If she's still alive, of course. What is your wife's name?" The girl asked coldly. He said the name. The girl tapped on the keyboard and then looked up at Noah with a confused look. "What is it?" Impatiently he asked. "What room is she in, and who is taking her in? What's the doctor's name?" "I need to talk to him." "And your wife has been taken away." You see, she was considered, well, nobody's. She had no family, no one to visit her. "If you want, we can give you the address of a man who—" "Don't worry, please. He's a very good doctor, one of the best in town. How was she taken?" "Why, no family." "Are you out of your mind?" "I'm her husband. She has a mother-in-law. How could you give a person away to someone you don't even know and not even tell me? You realize I'll sue you. But your mom, she signed the consent," the girl said. "Technically, she had to put her signature, and she was not against your wife being taken away by a doctor. She said that she herself was an old sick person, that she could not take care of Adriana, and we didn't know where to find you. Your mom didn't give us your phone number, nothing." "Give us the address," said No, "and you have my word I'll sue you, but not now. I'll see you in court later." He liked this story less and less, and the explanation lay on the surface. His mother had stuck Adriana in the first place she could find, without even bothering to find out what the conditions were like. Moreover, Adriana was listed in the local records as a single woman with no one. Formerly single, of course, with an old and sick mother-in-law and an absent husband. Yes, Camille had shown a marvel of ingenuity. And so when Adriana was taken away from here by some unknown doctor, he wasn't even informed. Camille would have given Adriana to an ogre just to get rid of her. Noah rode in a cab to the house of this unknown doctor and did not know what he wanted. To thank him, to put up a fight. Strangely enough, the last thing Noah thought about was Adriana, how she was being treated, whether she was alive. All these questions were secondary. The most important thing, the main thing, was that this doctor, whoever he was, had just come and brazenly taken someone else's. Adriana wasn't his. He had no right to her. "It's here," said the cab driver, stopping the car near a flashy new building. Well, it's all clear. Noah thought, examining the facade. Bay windows, panoramic windows, underground parking lots. A doctor who doesn't spare money for ponces. He checked the address, checked the apartment number, and went up to the right floor. The entrance was also impressive. Paintings, hanging crystal chandeliers, soft sofas. Did anyone really like all this? Noah had never understood what all this luxury was for, when ordinary light bulbs were enough for lighting and sofas in the entryway were idiotic, to make it more comfortable for kids to sit. And these carpets underfoot, they have to be cleaned and washed every day, cleaned and washed. Otherwise, in a week there'll be so much dirt that you won't be able to recognize the ornaments underneath. Vases with fresh flowers, that's ridiculous. And surely for all these extravagances you have to pay a lot. But if people have nowhere to put their money, why not? No, he was shouted from behind him. He shuddered and turned at the voice, still not daring to believe his ears. Adriana was standing in the open doorway. "Is that you?" he asked. His mouth was suddenly dry. His question was hoarse and unintelligible. "Is it really you, Adriana?" I am, she laughed. "Have I changed so much? Though, of course, the last time you saw me, I was lying flat and couldn't even speak, but as you see, I was lucky." She stood before him tall and slender in a relaxed pose. Her hair had grown back, became thicker, and was fashionably cut. Her eyes were full of life again, and she was laughing and talking. "A wonderful doctor, an acquaintance of Aunt Betty's and your mother's friend, helped me. He picked me up from that boarding house and brought me to his place. A week later, I could move the fingers on my right hand, and then, well, I'm fine now. I'm not going to be climbing anymore, but that's okay, right? I'll do something else. How are you doing?" He shrugged. "I don't know what to tell you. You see what I'm like? I wanted to get away from my troubles. Did it work?" Adriana grinned. "Escaped? From hardship, yes," he confessed. "You can't run away from yourself. I'm neither here nor there, neither in the past, nor in the present." "Why is that, Adriana?" "I don't know," she answered. "Did you have a choice to run or stay? You chose, and that's probably the price to pay. How's Camille doing?" She's fine, I think. I haven't seen her in a while." "What are we going to do now, Adriana?" "We're still married." "Not anymore," says Adriana. "We got a unilateral divorce a few months ago. I put your address on the application, and the notice didn't come. I didn't know where to find you." "I see." Noah sighed heavily. "Adriana, did you come to meet me?" Noah looked back and saw a tall man of about 45 years old come out of the elevator. He approached the woman with a firm gait, kissed her on the lips, and turned to Noah. "Are you young man here to see us?" "No." Noah shook his head. I got the wrong address, I'm sorry." He strode towards the elevator, realizing that there was nothing more for him to do here. Camille, sitting alone at the set table. The champagne was cooling in the refrigerator, and a store-bought chocolate cake, with a single candle in the center, was on the table. A birthday is a holiday to which one should invite guests, or at least your closest friends. But what do you do if you don't have any friends or relatives? The only friend is a cunt who can't understand the anxiety of a mother's heart. And the son Noah, having heard from Kathy what his mother had done, came to Camille with a scandal. He shouted that her brilliant plan was really, in fact, meanness, that she had been trying to persuade him to leave Adriana, and that she had taken advantage of a good moment to noodle Kathy. He didn't realize what he was saying. Camille was hurt to tears. She only wanted Noah not to ruin his life, not to turn into an exhausted nurse with a paralyzed wife. But her son wouldn't listen to her. He left and hasn't been back since. He changed his phone number. Can't get through, quit his job. Maybe he went somewhere else. But today, on her birthday, Camille didn't even get a congratulatory message from her son. Everyone close to her has betrayed her, turned their backs on her. And now she sat alone with champagne and cake, but she didn't want either, and she hadn't wanted anything for a long time. Camille dropped her head on her crossed arms and sobbed bitterly.